So today we're going to talk about artist masking fluid. And the idea behind a masking fluid, this one is from Winsor & Newton, and I've probably had it probably about 15 years. I don't use it a lot. The idea behind masking fluid is it forms a waterproof barrier between your paper and whatever you're painting. So anytime you want to leave a white area in your painting and yet not have to worry about accidentally filling it in, you can lay down some masking fluid to protect that area and to keep it white, and then it gets lifted off when you're finished, and you have that white area which you can then paint or add detail or just leave white. I ruined a lot of brushes before I learned how to properly apply masking fluid. And I find there's a few tools that are helpful to have when you're using it. This masking fluid is tinted, it's a light yellow color, and that just helps you to be able to see it while you're painting so that you know where it is. If I were to take my lovely Winsor & Newton Series 7 brush and put this in the masking fluid right now the way it is, I would ruin it. The masking fluid is very similar in consistency to a rubber cement, and it will cling to your brush and ruin your brush. So many artists get around this by having a dedicated brush for applying masking fluid, but I like to use the brushes that I have on hand. And so what I'll generally do, I'm just going to wet my brush first just to give it a nice shape so it's not quite so fluffy, and take out most of the water. And so I'm going to mask my brush or protect it from the masking fluid. And I do that, I keep a little canister of dishwashing soap, and I'm just going to saturate my brush with that soap. You can use bar soap as well, but I just find this is really handy and portable to have. And that soap will just form a barrier between the masking fluid and your brush so that your brush isn't ruined. And I make sure I go right up to the metal part, the ferrule, so I don't have the masking fluid clumping up in there. And then it's just a matter, I've already mixed this, and you'll want to make sure, if you shake it, you're going to get a lot of bubbles, and it makes it hard to get a good amount on your brush. So what I just do is just gently, swish it back and forth without shaking it and making it foam, because it takes a long time for those bubbles to settle. And then I can just reach in and pick up a little masking fluid on my brush. I like to put it on so that it thoroughly coats the paper, but isn't so thick that it's going to take forever to dry. You do not want to paint on your masking fluid until it is completely and thoroughly dry. And a few little dots just for fun. Another thing you can do with masking fluid is you could put a little on a toothbrush and maybe spatter it, and you could get some really fun like snow effects just with spattered masking fluid that you would then lift off when you're done painting. Masking fluid also goes by different names. You might hear misket or frisket, and that's the same thing, or liquid mask, and that's often what I'll call it, but it all does the same thing, all works the same. You can also get it in tinted in different colors, blue or gray or I don't know, maybe even pink. So I'm just going to give this some time to dry. I want it to have, it's quite shiny right now, so I want all that shine to fade so I can tell that it's thoroughly dry. I will allow it to dry before I paint on it. If it's still damp and I were to paint on it, it wants to bond with the paper and then you can't get it off. So that's bad news. The other thing that you don't want to do with masking fluid is leave it on for extended periods of time. If you put your painting away, if you're a sporadic painter and you have a painting with masking fluid on and you've put it away for months or longer, you might have trouble removing that masking fluid from your paper when it comes time to remove it. And when you put a lot of work into a painting, you certainly want to be able to remove your masking fluid when it comes time to finish it up. The other thing you'll want to do is keep it out of direct sunlight. You don't want it to be baked into the paper, and you want to use good quality paper. This is my Arches watercolor paper. I have tried using masking fluid on student grade, cheaper varieties of paper, and I've found that it wants to rip the paper when it's time to remove it. So that's something definitely to avoid. Like I mentioned, you could take a toothbrush or something and spatter it across your paper. The other thing I'll do is if I want a really fine line, this is a stylus that I've had for a long time. It's got a little ball tip on each end in 2 different sizes. So if I want a really fine line, I might just use my stylus to paint that really thin line. If I were doing ship's rigging or maybe a spider web or something like that. You can also use the edge of a credit card. Or if you have a brush, some of the paint brushes I have quite a pointed tip, so I've used that as well in applying masking fluid. Or if you have an old dried out ballpoint pen. Another thing you can do is there are tools especially for applying masking fluid. There's one called the Incredible Nib, and it's basically, just a pen nib. I don't have one. I generally try to use what I have on hand. So again, you can just apply it. And the nice thing about the metal stylus is it's easy to clean up. You don't have to worry about coating it with soap the way I did with my brushes. So now my masking fluid is thoroughly dry. It's still shiny because it's got that, rubber glossy finish, but it's dry. It's thoroughly dry. It almost feels still a little bit sticky, but because it has that rubbery base, then it's just going to have that different feel. It's not a water-based product. I'm just going to take some color and start painting right over my mask. And as you can see, the paint does kind of bead up on the mask. And you can put lots of water on it. It doesn't make a difference. I'm just going to use some of my favorite colors. Some good places to use masking fluid would be anytime you're painting snow, snow on branches, for example, where you're going to have a light and dark contrast areas. Painting water, painting, I've seen with painting houses, all the little details, architectural details on a house. And really anytime you've got, for example, you're painting a large scene and you've got a small area that needs to be different than the rest, a little house nestled in the trees, and you want to do a lot of washes over top. I'm going to give this a chance to dry. I wouldn't want to remove the masking fluid until it's thoroughly dry either, because of course I don't want anything to run into those white areas. I'm going to paint this little lined area here too, just with a little bit of a brown that I mixed up on my palette. Maybe add a little bit of orange in there too, just for fun. Cadmium red. Can be really time consuming to add masking fluid if you're doing it on a large area. For example, the tree branches like I mentioned. But the effect can be really quite beautiful when you have that strong contrast of white and dark and the crisp lines that you get as well from the masking fluid. So we're going to give this a chance to dry, and then I'll come back and show you how I remove it. Okay, so here are my 2 little dried washes, and of course with masking fluid, if I wanted to, I could go back and continue to paint over this until I was done. I could add further details and really add depth and dimension before I remove my masking fluid. But I'm just going to remove it now to show you how I do that. And for years I just used my finger and I would just rub at it and it would start to come away. And then once I got a little ball of that kind of rubbery masking fluid, it was a lot easier, and I would get a really sore fingertip from all that rubbing and scrubbing. But now I have this rubber pad, and it's got a kind of a pebbled surface, and it's actually made especially for picking up masking fluid. I've been keeping it in my pencil case, so it's a little bit grubby, but it does a really nice job of just lifting off that masking fluid. And it's just a lot more painless than using my finger. And I just just as though I were erasing. Just pull that over the surface, and as you can see, it comes off actually quite easily. And the paint is left behind. And isn't that pretty? Now let's try the finer lines, just so you can get a look at that too. Forgive any camera shake here. Kind of hard to avoid when the table is moving. There we go. So we've got two masked items and they're nice and white. At this point, if I wanted to, I could go in and add detail to my, it's almost a feather shape here. A little bit of masking still stuck on there. And there they are. So that gives you a little bit of a demonstration on how to use masking fluid. Main tips I would just want to recap are coat your brush with some kind of protective substance. Soap works well. And don't shake it too much. Those bubbles can be a real nuisance. Make sure it's dry thoroughly before you paint. Don't let it sit on your paper for too long and bake onto the surface, and use good quality paper. All of those things will help you have a lot more success with using masking fluid in your painting projects.